After being married for 38 years, raising 3 married children, and having 5 precious grandchildren, she's pulling this nonsense. I've worked hard to become debt-free and be just 2 years away from retirement. She claimed she was in Arizona for a mandatory educators conference, but I dropped her off at the airport, planning to pick her up on Thursday. A co-worker in Vegas for a PBR event sent me a photo of her in a casino with our family doctor. Now, it's Christmas, and all the kids are coming over. I was looking forward to hunting with my son and grandsons. I'm not sure if I should confront her now or act normal until after Christmas to avoid ruining it for the kids. Maybe picking her up and pretending everything is fine will give me a chance to gather more evidence. It's tough, but I don't want to devastate my children during this time of year. This woman sang a solo in church on Sunday and caught a flight on Monday to spend the week with the doctor. I've never suspected her of cheating in our 40-year relationship. I never have either. It seems like the secure life I thought I had is over. Thankfully, my parents aren't around to witness this. I might just catch a flight tomorrow and find them using different names. The frustrating part is both my brothers are gone, and there's no one I can talk to about this. Maybe a pastor. Who knows? She might be involved with him too. Update. I took some time off work and am currently at my camp. My wife's sister picked her up from the airport on Thursday evening. I hired a lawyer and a PI recommended by the lawyer. I haven't talked to my wife about the Vegas pictures, and the only people who know are my lawyers and Reddit. My wife thinks I'm at the camp because a big buck I've been hunting for a couple of seasons is back on my plot cameras. We've had phone and text conversations, just casual. She doesn't suspect that I'm investigating her trip or life. We end every conversation with, "I love you," as usual. I've followed my lawyer's advice about our finances. The PI confirmed an affair between my wife and the doctor for over a year. We'll find out more details later. She didn't attend a conference in Arizona. She spent every night in Vegas. I plan to confront her when the PI completes his investigation. We believe they will meet. Since I'm out of town, I intend to give them ample opportunity to do so before I come home. I wasn't aware that most affairs occur in a demographic group of 55 to 70 years old. I thought we had a very good marriage. She seemed content with where we were in life, and I believe she loved me as I did her. I loved her completely. Everything seems so surreal. Each day has brought things to light I never would have imagined. I guess at this point, I want to know how many years of my life have been a lie and why the life we had was not enough. Why was I not enough? Why were our children and grandchildren not enough? She is a beautiful woman. I always thought it was inside and out. I'm going to divorce her. There's no path to reconciliation. I'm not sure how scorched earth I will go. I'm very angry at both of them. I will confront the doctor and his wife together. I can't say today exactly what else I will do. I think I have to take it one step at a time, and the first step is to learn as much as I can before they have a chance to collaborate their stories. He may just be the latest in line. Update. I'll head home tonight. My 84-year-old mother-in-law has been a widow for 12 years and will be heartbroken by my wife's cheating. Tomorrow night, my wife's 3 married sisters, all in long-term marriages, are coming over for Christmas. Since my father-in-law passed away, I've been grilling steaks for them every Christmas. If I skip going home, it'll raise suspicions for my wife. I thought about faking the flu and staying put, but I've decided to go home. Missing this would affect the plan to return with my son and grandsons. I haven't confronted her yet. We've talked a bit, mostly through text. I'm sure she suspects nothing now. I've given the gate and house code to the PI. He, along with an IT guy, accessed her desktop while she was at work. Somehow, he's now getting her texts from iCloud. I don't fully understand how he pulled it off, but he did. I'm not in touch with the PI or lawyer daily. I don't know what he's found so far. I've got a meeting with him and my attorney next Friday morning, a week from tomorrow. It's tough for me to control my anger with what I know now. I think I'm spending unnecessarily on the PI, but my attorney wants me to keep gathering evidence until I confront her. I plan to get the info next week and hopefully stop paying him. I usually go to camp the week before and after Christmas. She won't suspect a thing. If I can hold off exploding when I get home, I'll leave again on Sunday. My son and grandsons are scheduled to hunt the week before Christmas, our yearly tradition. I haven't seen her in almost 2 weeks. I never imagined my love for her could turn into so much hatred and contempt. My plan is to wrap up the evidence I get next Friday after Christmas lunch. We'll open gifts with our children and grandchildren. I'll let her open hers last, ask her to show our children, take her phone, and leave. My next stop will be the doctor's house, where I'll deliver the evidence to his wife and family and then file for divorce on the grounds of infidelity. Update. I got back from the camp last Thursday evening, and she was home. I was worn out from lack of sleep, so our conversation was brief. On Friday night, we had a Christmas gathering at our place with her mother and 3 sisters. I managed to pull it off without her getting suspicious. I spent most of Saturday away, and after church on Sunday, I went back to my camp. My son and grandson joined me there on Sunday night. We hunted all week, and now I'm back home. We don't have any plans for tomorrow. Our kids and grandkids will go to church with us on Sunday and then come over here for Christmas lunch and gifts. I've surprised everyone by keeping my emotions in check, given the tough situation I'm facing. I've reconsidered how I'll reveal her affair. I won't confront her on Christmas. I've scheduled a meeting with my attorney on Tuesday morning. I plan to gather all the evidence he and the investigator have collected, along with the divorce papers he's prepared. I want to have my son and 2 daughters come to our house for a family meeting on Tuesday night to expose her affair and confront her. At this point, I'm not sure how I'll confront the doctor and his wife. My goal is to damage his reputation and career using any means available to me. Update. We got through Christmas with my kids, grandkids, and in-laws. On Monday morning, I talked to my pastor about the situation. He arranged a meeting between me and the affair partner's wife. We decided to confront our spouses on Monday night, making them write detailed letters about the affair. I made my wife write the letter and didn't let her explain anything to me. I told her I knew she was in Vegas and who she was with. I instructed her to include all details, and if there was any contradiction to the evidence I had, reconciliation was off the table. On Tuesday morning, I met with my attorney, got the collected evidence, and received advice. In the afternoon, I met with the affair partner's employer, demanding his termination. He got fired today. On Tuesday night, my children came, and their mother confessed to them. They're shocked and hurt. My wife went home with my daughter and is still there. I'm figuring out my next move. Reconciliation seems unlikely. I'll decide what to do with the affair partner once I'm clear about my own marriage. She admitted everything and answered every specific detail I asked for in her letter. Update. Did I question her why? Certainly, I asked why. She couldn't explain why. She told me and our kids that she felt like independent, aware she was ruining her life, but unable to stop. She told our children that they shouldn't have to endure disappointment or embarrassment due to their mother's immorality, expressing they didn't deserve the shame of a fancy woman. I won't share all she said because I'm unsure if any of it is true. How did she behave? She's completely shattered, remorseful, and pleading for forgiveness from me and the kids. She comprehends the gravity of her actions. How did my children react? One told her, and the other 2 agreed. It would have been easier to bury you than deal with this. Do I want to stay married? Yes, I do. That's why I never cheated on my wife. Have I met the affair partner's wife and told her? Yes, we've met twice and communicated by phone and text several times. Do I not care for his family by having him fired? I care more for the next patient's wife. He's inappropriate at 7 a.m. I'm considering divorcing her. I'm not sure. Have I sought therapy? Not at this time. What I need is for this to go away. If you know anyone who can make that happen, I'll do therapy. Every situation is unique in its elements, personalities, and complexities. I could handle it differently at a different time in my life. Every nuance I'm dealing with has been a great source of strength. One Redditor has been a valuable source of wisdom, knowledge, and encouragement. He has helped me more than I can express gratitude for. It's not like I got to spend quality time with my wife. She's not here. Why is she at my daughter's and not my in-laws? Her dad is dead, and her mom is 84. I didn't want her mom to deal with this. She's at my baby daughter and her husband's home. They have no children yet, and the chance of her turning any of my children against me doesn't exist. This is especially true of this little Spitfire, 10 years younger than her sister and 12 years younger than her brother. She spent more hours in a deer stand, bay boat, and office truck with me than we could count. She won't let her say true things that are bad about me, let alone lies. Update. Weekend plans. I had a brother who was 14 years younger than me. He was a college professor living 8.5 hours away from our hometown. Unfortunately, he passed away in a motorcycle accident in 2017. He left behind a daughter, now 24, who is married and resides in a different state than her mother. However, she's brought her new baby home to visit her mother and in-laws. My sister-in-law hasn't remarried. I called my sister-in-law last night to find out when my niece was heading back home. Turns out she's staying this week with her husband's parents, about 40 minutes from my sister-in-law. Since my children are smothering me, I've decided to go on a road trip. I'll be meeting my great-nephew, named after my brother and me. I'll arrive late tonight. I asked her to reserve a hotel room, but she insisted, saying, "There's no way in hell that's happening. You'll stay here, and we'll watch movies and eat ice cream." I don't know when I'm coming back. I haven't spoken to or seen my wife since Tuesday night. I blocked her number. I called my son and informed him of my destination, asking him to go to the office and lease a rental property owned by my company. It's a renovated house intended for sale. I instructed him to let his mother know to collect what she needs from our house and move into the rental. She should pay rent to my son, who will then pay my company. I'm getting a new keypad installed on the gate and doors of my house on Wednesday, so she needs to get her stuff now. Update. Had a good weekend. When I called my sister-in-law, I let her know I'd be coming alone to see my niece and her new baby. She asked why my wife isn't coming, and I just said there are some issues, and I'll let you know when I get there. I got here around midnight, and she had just taken a hot pound cake out of the oven, the best thing I've eaten in weeks. I shared all the details of my saga with her. I teared up a few times, but as I went through it with her, I broke down and wept. She was very supportive and wept with me, stroking my bruised ego, and I guess I felt better after we talked. I went to bed around 3 o'clock yesterday morning. Yesterday morning, she cooked bacon and eggs for breakfast, and as I ate, told me that I may make the rules and run the show back home, but not at her house. She then proceeded to tell me my schedule. At 1 o'clock, I had a haircut appointment, overdue since this all happened, and then we were going to Dillard's to buy clothes to fit me. I've lost over 30 pounds in 3 weeks. After the haircut, we were going to a friend's house for a bonfire and fireworks last night. I was also going with her to church today, and she was visiting her parents this afternoon. She's cooking supper tonight, and her daughter and son-in-law are coming to eat and visit. Her son-in-law is taking me deer hunting tomorrow on an 8,000-acre timber co-lease he's part of. He's off all week, and if I want, I can stay and hunt all week. She will wash my clothes and feed me. We won't talk about my problems again until I leave to go home. So, I did what I was told to do. She went with me to her regular salon, and on the way there said, "I'm going to use you to have some fun. When I introduce you, I'm going to give them your first and middle name." I asked her, "What the hell?" And she just laughed and said, "Just play along. I'm going to give these witches something to talk about." My middle name is my mother's maiden name. That's how she introduced me to her hairstylist. During my haircut, she asked where I was from, and I said, "Detroit." There's no way my accent will allow me to be from Detroit. My sister-in-law never missed a beat and said, "He's a logger." Next stop, Dillard's. I haven't shopped for anything in years. Ended up buying 3 new pants, 4 shirts, 2 pairs of shoes, a tie, and believe it or not, a $75 tie and a heart-shaped marked suit. According to her, it's the only suit my brother would wear. I didn't know he was so particular about his clothes. Also bought a new belt. The suit had to be hemmed, and she convinced them to do it while we waited. On the way home, she told me I'd be her date for the party in church, so I was. She told me to look at her like I looked at a new pistol so they would buy it. I went along with her except at the party. I was from Atlanta, sold road graders, and had been married and divorced 4 times. At church this morning, we got there late and left early because she doesn't want to be struck by lightning for lying in church. She sat right up under me, held my hand, and we walked out. I've had a good time looking like Dumb and Dumber with my 46-year-old sister-in-law. She has cut up the whole time, and I have laughed, genuinely laughed. I haven't done that for 3 weeks. I'm going to hunt tomorrow and may stay until Wednesday, but I have to be at work Friday. I've talked to my son a couple of times. He thinks they need to try to get her some medical help. She evidently is not saying much and stays in her bedroom at my daughter's house most of the time. Her phone is dead, and he and my other daughter communicate with her through my youngest. The affair partner's wife sent her a long text in which she called her everything but a child of God. I haven't communicated with my wife. She asked where I was and told my daughter I would never be able to forgive her, and she didn't blame me for not forgiving. My son said she looks like passing away. I still see no path to reconciliation. However, I am not going to file for divorce until I am completely sure. Some have said divorce and reconcile. If I change my mind, that seems like a waste of time, energy, and money. When I decide to divorce, it will be final. I also am not going to sue a fair partner if I don't divorce. If I do divorce, I will sue him to defray what the divorce settlement will be otherwise. I don't want his money. I have come to terms with the fact that this is not going to end soon and that my life will never be the same. Update. My wife is in the hospital. Yesterday morning, my daughter took her to the ER because she was dehydrated. Tests revealed that her kidney function wasn't normal, and she was showing signs of confusion, leading to her admission. They started her on a drip, and today they will conduct more labs. A psych evaluation has been ordered, and they anticipate her stay in the hospital to last most of the week. My son informed her sisters about her hospitalization, mentioning that I was out of town. As far as I know, her sisters and mother are unaware of her affair. I plan to sit down with her mother and oldest sister this weekend. In hindsight, I should have done this last Friday before leaving town. I'm still at my sister-in-law's house. I went hunting yesterday, but it is raining today, so I chose not to go out again this morning. Last night's dinner included fried steak, mashed potatoes and gravy, homemade biscuits, apple cobbler, and ice cream. This morning my sister-in-law has a few things to do, but instructed me to be dressed and ready to go rambling when she returns. I suppose I'm glad to be here. I don't feel like talking to my friends just yet, and being at work isn't appealing. I have my laptop and phone, and an assistant co-worker who has been with me for 25 years, so business is being conducted as usual. He knows about the affair because he was the one who made me aware of the Vegas trip. Regarding her sister, I called her and provided a basic summary of the affair and the circumstances leading to my wife's hospitalization. She was genuinely shocked, apologetic, and sympathetic. My mother-in-law is leaving tomorrow on a trip with 3 other widows she is friends with. My daughters, part of what they jokingly call the BHH gang, blue-haired hoe, enjoy taking bus tours. She said she was not going to tell her about the affair or the psych evaluation, just that my wife's condition didn't seem serious enough for me to cut short my trips. She mentioned that I didn't seem myself and looked troubled when they left my house. The sisters are going to assist my daughters and daughter-in-law during the hospital stay, and one of them will take her home with them until she is able to move from our house. I called my youngest daughter and told her to go by the office and get a check. Go cash it, buy a card, and take it by her grandmother's house. I have a name stamp at the office she can sign the card with to put a note in it to enjoy her trip and that I loved her. Update. Regarding my wife's health, her kidney function has shown improvement. However, based on a psychiatric evaluation, she has experienced a psychotic break. She's disoriented, believing that we were in a car accident, and I am now deceased. She's distressed, thinking my funeral happened without her, and she's expressing her emotions in a way that's difficult to comprehend. Tonight, they transferred her to a hospital specialized in mental trauma, expecting a full recovery in the coming days or weeks. However, she must have no contact with anyone for the next 10 days. My middle daughter will be the family contact for afternoon updates until she can have visitors. This situation is an unbelievable and unnecessary mess. I'm still at Sparky's place, and she arranged a 9:30 a.m. appointment with a psychiatrist she had seen for 2 years after my brother's tragic passing away. After a shower, when putting on my pajamas to go back downstairs, I realized that all my perfectly good white Fruit of the Loom boxer shorts were missing. They had been replaced by boxer briefs from Duluth Trading Company with a band that says, "Go Buck Undressed." The colors include red, black, neon blue, maroon, and dark and light gray. When I questioned her about it, she humorously said the 60s called and wanted those ugly drawers back. She added that the boys need to breathe. Update. I got back home on Thursday night after seeing a psychologist my sister-in-law recommended, who she had used after my brother's passing away. The meeting didn't go well. To be fair to the counselor, I wasn't keen on going, and I was pretty angry at the time. Discussing the details of my wife's affair made me very uncomfortable. I had to attend a work meeting on Friday for a contract addendum that needed my presence and signature on a modified agreement. I met with my children in the afternoon to update them on their mother's condition. The clinician asked us to submit a plan for her discharge, and I stood firm that she couldn't return home but should move into a rental property. Today's status report showed encouraging progress over the weekend. They are also planning family sessions with her as early as the end of this week. I made it clear to my children that I wouldn't be attending any family sessions. I told them her recovery wasn't my responsibility and I wouldn't be part of it. While they may not fully agree, that's the stance I'm taking. However, I did commit to not filing for divorce in the next 6 months. I attended church on Sunday, sitting in our usual spot of nearly 40 years. None of the affair partner's family was there, and I didn't bother asking my pastor about them because I don't care. This afternoon, I met with a psychologist recommended by my pastor. It was a productive meeting for me. He's 74 years old, working part-time from an office behind his home. He outlined the goals he'd like to achieve with me, and I agreed to follow the steps. I feel comfortable with him and agreed to meet weekly. An investigator from the State Medical Board Examiner's Office is coming to my office on Wednesday morning. This follows a complaint filed by the attorney against the affair partner. I'll have to give a sworn deposition about the affair. I resent every step I have to take because of her affair. While I don't think she's faking a mental breakdown, I find it challenging to be sympathetic. Update. My wife is still undergoing treatment and is committed to staying there for 30 days. She's improving, but my children agree that she needs more in-house treatment. I haven't directly communicated with her since December 27th. To cover the costs, she withdrew from her retirement account. I haven't had a sit-down with my mother-in-law. She and her daughters have visited my wife. I texted her that I would talk when I felt ready. She has called to check on me multiple times. While she's sad, she remains strong. There's no news about the affair partner, but his house is up for sale. I'm unsure if they are separated or still together. I've attended counseling twice and am actually looking forward to my Monday meeting. It's been beneficial for me. The affair is widely known and being gossiped about. Despite being thoroughly embarrassed by her actions, I continue to attend church and hold my head up. My children and grandchildren are doing well. Keeping busy at work and managing my son's re-election campaign has helped me stay occupied. Lately, I've noticed more attractive women than ever before. I'm not sure if it's good or bad, just something I've become more aware of. I believe that covers everything. Update. My wife left the hospital on Tuesday and headed to a rental property owned by my company. Despite being an older house, it has undergone a complete renovation from the stud walls. I still haven't spoken to her since December 27th. She penned 2 letters expressing remorse and seeking my forgiveness. I haven't replied, except for telling my children that I've read them and will reach out when I'm ready to discuss the past and the future. We have a woman who has been a housekeeper for my wife for over 20 years. I sent people to my house, and following my daughter and the housekeeper's guidance, they moved a bedroom suite and other essentials to create a comfortable space for my wife. They bought new furniture, and everything has been ready for her release from the hospital for over a week. She arranged to employ the housekeeper every day for as long as needed, providing her with a driver and sitter for the nights her sisters stay as long as required. I had dinner with my mother-in-law at her home on Tuesday night and explained my stance. She was very understanding and expressed her support for me. According to my son, his grandmother visited his mother last night and wasn't very sympathetic. Apparently, she didn't spare my wife's feelings with what she told her. This is the first time they discussed my wife's betrayal. I'm going to Sparky's tomorrow. She has tickets for a concert on Saturday night. Initially, she and a friend were going, but the friend can't make it due to a coworker's funeral on Saturday. We'll fly to North Carolina tomorrow afternoon and return Sunday afternoon. I'm looking forward to something different, and hopefully I'll enjoy it. I'm actually enjoying counseling and look forward to the weekly sessions. It seems to help me compartmentalize the pieces of my life.
I'm a man in my late 20s. Growing up, I never had much interest in academics. and have been working in a manufacturing job for a long time. I've been at the factory since my high school teacher recommended me, and even wrote a letter of recommendation, given how many have left over the years. I'm considered one of the longest-serving employees. Naturally, this led to a promotion from a general employee to a supervisory role. And now I'm even being considered for higher positions. My effort to always work diligently and pleasantly has been recognized. The challenge now is that our company has acquired a great piece of land in a rural area outside the city to build a new factory. However, given its location, no one is eager to move there. This is especially true for those with families, considering schools for their children and employment for their spouses. One day, the boss called me in and said, "Ethan, think of it as a chance to save a substantial amount of money and go there for just 3 years. We'll take good care of your vacations and leave days. We're really short on people for management positions." After giving it some thought, the offer didn't seem too bad. The salary would significantly increase, and after just 3 years, I'd be guaranteed a promotion upon my return. Although it's a rural area, there are quite a few houses available for rent, and the company offered to cover my housing costs. Considering everything, it didn't seem like a step down from my current situation. The only downsides might be the challenge of dating and a lack of nightlife, but I'm still in my late 20s, and I figured it could be a good opportunity to save up some money. A few days later, I went to my boss and said, "I'll go. You promise a promotion upon my return, right?" We had this conversation, and then I found out I had to move much sooner than expected. With only about 3 weeks to prepare, I had to quickly find a place to live and book a moving service. Since I couldn't visit the place myself, I relied on recommendations from coworkers who were also moving to find a place in a similar neighborhood. I ended up in an old row house, which was quite spacious at around 70 square meters and had recently been renovated, so the condition wasn't bad. However, it was located in a more secluded part of the neighborhood, with fields right outside the window. I could see tractors passing by, and at night, all you could hear were the sounds of crickets. It was a 10-minute walk to the nearest grocery store. Still, there was a shuttle bus for commuting, and I didn't mind the walk, so it seemed like it would be manageable. The first month was incredibly busy, with adapting to the new environment and training many new employees. After about a month, I finally took a 3-day break and spent my time lazily at home. One day, I opened the window for some air and found myself gazing out at the fields, where I saw a woman working. She wore a wide-brimmed hat and a floral scarf that covered her face, making it hard to see her clearly. But it was evident she was diligently working in the field. She was wearing the kind of loose pants common in rural areas. But what struck me as unusual was that she seemed quite tall and slender, not quite what you'd expect from someone in this neighborhood. I found myself inexplicably drawn to watching her, and before I knew it, I had dozed off and enjoyed a leisurely nap on my day off. Then, one day on my way home from work, I encountered the woman I had seen from my window. I was walking home from the company shuttle bus stop and saw her working in a field close to the road, driven by curiosity and a desire to know more about her. I approached and initiated a conversation. Getting closer, I greeted her with, "Hello. I've seen you around as I passed by, but this is the first time we're actually speaking." The lady glanced at me and stood up, saying, Are you from the industrial park? Just moved into that mansion over there? Nice to meet you. She greeted me warmly. I didn't dare ask her age at first, meeting it seemed rude. From her appearance, she looked to be in her 40s, similar to the other women around the industrial area. A few days later, as I was returning home from work and decided to pick up some beer to kill time, she recognized me working in her garden and initiated a conversation. Looks like you're just getting back. I was grateful. She spoke first and cheerfully responded, Yes, it's been dark for a while, but you're still working hard. She then mentioned, Just telling myself a little more, and now it's this late. Is that beer? I'm so thirsty, suddenly craving a beer. Seeing a good opportunity, I cautiously asked, If you're not too busy, would you like to join me for a drink? I don't really know anyone around here, so it's a bit lonely. To my surprise, she happily agreed, dusted off her clothes, and followed me home. Upon arriving, she asked, I'm a bit sweaty. Could I borrow a shirt? I'll just rinse off quickly. I was momentarily taken aback, but lent her a casual shirt and shorts. She then offered to cook with whatever was available at my place. In no time, she whipped up a delicious homemade meal that we enjoyed with the beer. As the alcohol set in and we chatted, she revealed she was in her 60s. I was honestly shocked. I would have guessed late 40s at most. She shared that her husband had passed away before their children were born, and since then, she has been living alone. As we got to know each other over drinks, we found ourselves lying on the floor, deep in conversation until our eyes met. I'm not sure what came over me, but I moved closer, and when she didn't pull away, our lips met. We naturally spent a pleasant time together until the early morning. Dew began to fall. Feeling it was only right, I composed myself and walked her home in the fresh night air. Turns out, she didn't live far. Despite the awkwardness, I was somewhat exhilarated as I returned home and eventually fell into an exhausted sleep. Heading to work the next day, I started to second-guess what had happened. In such a small rural community, rumors of our unusual relationship could spread, and I began to worry. Returning home after work with mixed feelings, I found her, dressed casually this time, waiting at my doorstep. She said, I noticed you didn't have much for sides, so I made some. Please, take care. She was about to leave right after dropping them off. I couldn't just let her go, so I awkwardly invited her. Since you've made the effort to bring the sides, why not stay for dinner? During dinner, I learned she was the same age as my grandmother. My grandmother had my father at a very young age, so the age gap wasn't that big. The realization that I had been intimate with someone my grandmother's age added to my confusion. However, she seemed indifferent or unaware of my turmoil, casually suggesting, Just call me sister. It feels strange to be called aunt or grandma since I don't have kids, trailing off at the end. So from then on, I comfortably refer to her as sister, and she started bringing over dishes regularly since that memorable first night. Feeling the need to reciprocate, I often tried to create the right atmosphere. Around that ambiguous time, she started calling me honey in a way that felt more like how older women might address each other rather than a pet name. It's unusual, isn't it, to be called honey by someone of the same sex, nearly 40 years your senior. I was taken aback, but didn't know how to ask her to stop without making it awkward, so I let it slide. We weren't officially dating or even exchanging messages, but we found excuses to meet almost daily under the guise of sharing meals or sides. Up until then, my experience with older women was virtually non-existent. My social circle was mainly mid-20s. Women I met through work or younger friends introduced by pals. But now, our secret rendezvous weren't just confined to my place or hers. We even met in secret in the fields. Initially, I was terrified of getting caught by the neighbors, but with each daring encounter, we grew bolder. In areas without proper street lighting, unless someone was intentionally shining a flashlight, we were practically invisible. What started with my heart racing eventually evolved to me enjoying our meetings even more than her, to the point where getting caught never even crossed my mind. I'd casually suggest, "Let's meet in the fields tomorrow." This went on for almost 3 months until a new woman around my age, in her late 20s, joined our factory. Since peers were rare, we naturally grew close, and at some point, it became evident she was interested in me. The factory folks even nudged me, saying, "It looks like Ethan is into you. You should give it a shot." But for some reason, I couldn't find myself interested in her, despite her attractiveness and figure. To be precise, my attention just doesn't gravitate towards women my age anymore. I've developed more interest in the older women I've been seeing these past months. When I take a moment to reflect, I find myself fantasizing about being close not just with the woman from the factory, but also with her in more specific scenarios at work, in the fields, even at my own home. The folks at the factory seemed to want to push us together, so I made an excuse, saying, "I'll be here for over 2 years, and if we break up, it'll just be awkward." I really don't like that kind of discomfort. They didn't press further, but I could tell they were disappointed. And that woman, even though she treats me like a friend and doesn't contact me outside of work, her eyes say something else entirely. But what can I do? I no longer find women my age appealing, even while enjoying my time with this older woman. Thoughts like, "This really isn't right," keep creeping up on me. Yet, I rationalize that it's not so bad for the time being, as long as I'm living here. I've leaned towards just enjoying the situation I'm in, but then I worry about the future. What if, when I return to my hometown, I still don't find women my age attractive? Honestly, with over 2 years left here, I sometimes get frustrated wondering why I'm even thinking about this now. Can I just ignore it and enjoy the present? I hope I won't end up only being interested in women who are as old as my mom or grandmother when I go back.
After I cheated, my husband's revenge prank escalated, spiraling our marriage into tragic ruin. Approaching April's tea, I eagerly awaited a prank from my husband, Lester. Over the years, our history as pranksters had seen an annual increase in the severity of our jokes. The streak of mischief began with me one warm day when Les and I went out. Despite wearing a buttoned-up jacket, I claimed to feel a chill as we strolled through the mall. Suddenly, I removed my jacket to reveal a t-shirt with the words, "I am with stupid," complete with an arrow pointing sideways. Standing right next to me, he couldn't initially discern what was on my t-shirt, only noticing the amused reactions of passers-by. It took him a while to realize that every time I shifted position, it was to ensure the arrow on my t-shirt was pointing at him. His face turned crimson, and thus commenced our official prank war. Then came the year when I received an official-looking email, supposedly from the local health department, claiming I had been listed as a love-making contact of an Anthony Sanders and instructing me to undergo immediate testing. What I hadn't anticipated was the CC line, including everyone in my office suggesting they had received the same alarming message. Most of them knew Anthony as an old college boyfriend, oblivious to the fact that I hadn't seen him in over a year, let alone been involved. Lovingly, Lester, you got me good. Last year, I edited a photo, replacing my husband's average-sized member with a comically tiny one, and sent it around his office. Truth be told, he's actually above average in that department. He was furious, spending 2 nights away before even considering coming home. No matter how much I apologized, I ended up resorting to an offer of 3 specific favors just to coax him back 3 bed acts he couldn't refuse. Once home and appeased, he claimed our pranks had spiraled out of control, vowing never to retaliate or prank me again. His promise seemed sincere, but I didn't buy it. I could almost see the gears turning in his head, plotting his revenge. I was certain this year would showcase the darkest corners of his devious mind. I waited, a mix of anticipation and dread. I went to extreme eavesdropping on his calls, planting a recorder in his car, even scrutinizing our finances for anything suspicious. I was determined not to fall for his prank this time. Yet, my snooping turned up nothing incriminating. He was far cleverer than I had given him credit for. As March passed, Lester appeared unchanged at home while I scrutinized his every move. From midnight on March 16th, I was on high alert, but nothing occurred right after midnight, leaving me on edge. There were still hours for him to spring his plan. I swore to be prepared for whatever he had up his sleeve. The following morning, April set, when I descended to the kitchen, he casually offered to whip up breakfast, a rare gesture that immediately raised a red flag. There was no chance I'd consume anything he prepared. I claimed I was in the mood for just cereal that morning. While pouring myself a bowl and adding milk, I discreetly sniffed it, on the lookout for any added substances. Nothing. A tentative taste confirmed its normality. I stubbornly skipped the coffee, citing a reduction in my caffeine intake. Truthfully, I avoided it because he made it. I observed him preparing his beloved ham, egg, and cheese English muffin, almost tempted to ask for one despite the risk. Post-breakfast, we both got ready for work. Amidst checking my toothpaste for tampering and ensuring my cologne retained its usual fragrance and a skunk odor, everything appeared normal, except for my sore anxiety. I inspected my car for any suspicious devices, wishing for one of those border-crossing mirrors on a stick to scrutinize beneath it. All seemed regular, yet my heart drummed loudly when I started the engine, testing the brakes unnecessarily. I scolded myself Lester wouldn't resort to anything physically damaging. I repeated that to reassure myself, but doubt lingered. He was seriously upset about my last prank. At work, my enthusiastic best friend, Marta, eagerly greeted me and expressed her curiosity about Lester's antics the previous night. I had confided in Marta about my concerns regarding Lester's impending April Fool's trick, recalling her support for my prank from the previous year. She jokingly requested an unaltered version of the photo, or even better, a private viewing in our bedroom. I noted her eagerness for some excitement in her life. I shared with Marta that Lester had been relatively quiet, but I was convinced he was plotting something. I could sense it in the air at night. Marta playfully commented on her love for slipping song lyrics into conversations, prompting a chuckle from me. I believe he's prolonging my suspense just to push me over the edge. Well, he doesn't have far to go right now, but mark my words, whatever he pulls, I won't fall for it. He may be the prince of pranks, but I am the queen of jokes. We laughed, and then I finally indulged in my much-delayed morning coffee. I checked my desk for unexpected surprises and went about my work relatively normally, though occasional thoughts of what might await me later lingered. The first time my desk phone rang, I practically leaped out of my chair, chuckling at my own heightened nerves. Nothing out of the ordinary happened for the rest of the day. I half expected a delivery of risque items that would accidentally be revealed in front of my colleagues, but thankfully, nothing of the sort occurred. As the workday's end neared, my anxiety skyrocketed. I hit the road, nearly missing the red light as my mind fixated on what awaited me at home. I gave myself a light slap to refocus on driving safely. Upon arriving home, I started preparing dinner. Lester arrived at his usual time, appearing completely drained. I suspected it was an act, anticipating more theatrics. From him soon. I asked if he had a tough day, dealing with too many graduates struggling with basic math. Lester responded that my remark hit too close to home to be funny. He explained that his mood wasn't due to a challenging day, but rather an exasperating one. The quarterly report deadline had kept him occupied with mundane details and figure cross-checking usually done before lunch. Today's struggle to reconcile 2 totals that were supposed to match took an extra 4 hours. He even missed lunch and considered calling to say he'd be late for dinner. Fortunately, he caught the error, wrapped up the report before clocking out, and expressed being absolutely famished. He hoped dinner was on its way within 20 minutes. I suggested he fix himself a drink while I finished up, to which he responded positively, appreciating the idea. Lester leaned in, planting a kiss on my cheek before heading to the cupboard where we stored the liquor. He grabbed the bourbon and mixed himself a drink before settling in the living room, tuning in to reruns of Swamp People. It was comical to think he'd ever venture into a place teeming with mosquitoes, alligators, and snakes. I suspected he had a soft spot for people with Cajun accents. During dinner, I attempted to strike up a conversation, but my focus was primarily on uncovering the impending prank. Eventually, I probed, asking if Lester had anything planned for the night. He responded, stating that he had nothing planned. After the debacle with the quarterly report, he emphasized that he didn't even consider bringing work home and expressed his desire to unwind with me by his side. Playfully teasing, he mentioned that since his favorite girl wasn't there, I would have to do. I nudged him in response. After dinner, as I filled the dishwasher with the dishes, I suggested watching a movie and snacking on some popcorn. Lester showed interest, and after preparing the popcorn in the microwave, I brought it in a big bowl to the living room, along with our usual drinks to relax. I asked Lester what he wanted to watch, mentioning that while I typically preferred movies with closeness and roughness, I was open to his choice for the night. I suggested Roadhouse, noting its blend of romance, nudity, and violence, and to mention Patrick Swayze's physique. Lester chuckled in response. "Sounds good to me. I haven't seen that in a while. I love the part when the stuffed polar bear falls on the thug. Was it a polar bear or a regular bear?" "I thought it was a polar bear, but we can see." We were watching the movie and eating popcorn. I had a couple of rum and cokes to Lester's bourbons, and at last I was finally beginning to relax and let down my guard. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, and my internal alarm went off. "This is it," I told myself immediately. "No one comes to our house unannounced after dark." I immediately put my mind on DEFCON alert status and was ready to spoil whatever dirty trick he had devised. Lester, of course, vehemently denied knowing who it might be. "Yeah, right." I went to the door and opened it up. I was surprised to see there was a guy, not just an average man, but a huge biker guy at the door. 2 others were on their bikes in the driveway. I shook my head in disbelief. I thought, "Lester, this is going to be good." I greeted the scarred, tattooed biker with a knowing smile, expressing my awareness of the situation. He apologized for disturbing me and asked if this was where the party was. Responding affirmatively, I slung my arm around his waist, leading him to the center of the living room, noticing his firm abs and bulging biceps. My husband, seeing me with this stranger, leaped off the couch, bewildered. He questioned who the stranger was, and I played along, stating that he was here to fulfill my fantasy. My husband realized it was an April Fool's joke and expressed his initial confusion. I acknowledged the prank and continued with the act, telling the stranger, whom my husband referred to as Paul, that his prank was over and he could leave. The stranger, calling himself the Bandit, insisted on staying, and I affirmed that I wanted him to stay. I turned to the Bandit, planting an exaggerated kiss on him, much to my husband's dismay. Lester rushed over, and the Bandit grabbed him by the throat, making him stumble and choke. Chuckling, the Bandit pulled me close, caressing my backside while kissing me. I reciprocated, sensing his arousal. Lester charged again, and the Bandit knocked him down with a single punch. Addressing me, the Bandit asked if he should handle Lester or if he should stay and watch. I chose to let Lester watch, stating that it would teach him not to mess with me. The Bandit agreed and stepped outside to inform the others. Inside, one of the men scanned the room and questioned what was happening, noting that it didn't resemble a party. I explained that the lady referring to myself wanted to be involved with bikers before heading to the actual party. Commenting on my assets, they discussed their plans, with one expressing the intention to take my rear first. They noticed Lester on the floor and learned he was my husband, whom I wanted to watch. I suggested tying him to a chair and taping his mouth, offering the materials from the garage. Lester protested, declaring that regardless of the situation being a joke or not, it marked the end of our marriage. I responded, accusing him of setting it up and now being upset because I wasn't playing along as he intended. As Lester lunged again, the bikers subdued him and convincingly pinned him to the chair. I wondered if their coordination was rehearsed. The bikers inquired about getting the party started and asked about drinks. I directed them to the liquor cabinet and the fridge for a couple of beers. The Bandit turned to me, asking how I wanted to start and how far Lester had suggested they go. I responded, asking the Bandit about Lester's instructions, and he looked, puzzled. He mentioned I could go all the way however I wanted. In a referenced version, he did it right. If we're going through with this, I could use some help setting the mood. Got anything stronger than liquor? Absolutely, I always carry something. He fetched something intriguing from his bike. A sip later, I found myself swapping kisses with all 3 of them, smirking at Lester, who seemed to struggle to break free. Approaching me, the Bandit declared, "Time to dance, darling," tearing off my dress and swiftly losing my underwear. Soon he was bare, as were his companions. Panic started to grip me. I hadn't anticipated Lester would allow things to escalate like this. I shouted to Lester, "Consider this a lesson if you try to outsmart me." Engaging with his friend, I sensed his imminent climax and attempted to pull away. "Too bad your pleasure isn't our concern. Your job is to satisfy us," they retorted. The following hour felt unreal, despite my objections and resistance in the midst of this chaotic group. At the end of it all, anger boiled within me towards Lester for orchestrating this and then allowing these men to subject me to such things. Each time I glanced at Lester in the chair, rage surged, yet I masked my distress. I wanted him to believe I relished it, but I couldn't let him think his prank succeeded. After a couple of hours, the bikers departed. My movements were labored, but I managed to reach the kitchen and grab a sharp knife. When I went to release Lester, I discovered his wrists and ankles were injured. His ankles were bleeding, the ropes having torn into his skin. That seemed to have helped him, certainly. I anticipated his explosion, maybe even a physical outburst. Once the ropes and duct tape were finally off, standing there, I glared at him, ready for his expected fury. But instead of a verbal or physical reaction, he looked at me with silent rage, shoved me aside, and ascended the stairs. I retreated to the downstairs bathroom to cleanse the remnants of the bikers from my skin, noticing numerous hickeys scattered across various parts of my body. I remained in the bathroom when the front door slammed shut. Moments later, the screech of Lester's car signaled his departure. I assumed he'd sulk in a motel, a pattern had shown before. I silently celebrated my victory in the annual April Fool's prank and retired to bed. Saturday morning arrived and my phone buzzed incessantly. It was Marta, asking me to spill the details about what Lester had done. I responded, saying he wouldn't believe it, and suggested meeting for lunch at Friday's. Marta agreed, urging me not to tease. At Thank God It's Friday we indulged in our meal, and I recounted the actual biker encounter that was meant to be a sham, along with Lester's furious reaction. Marta expressed disbelief that I was involved in that, especially considering Lester had set me up for it. Playfully, switching to a terrible southern accent, she pretended to swoon, and I chuckled. I explained how Lester had tried to deceive me with a prank involving facing a biker, only to shout April Fools afterward. I shared that I had outplayed his prank by turning it into a real event. Although I hadn't planned to go that far, it worked in a strange way. I doubted Lester would ever try something like that again. Marta questioned whether I was positive Lester had set it up, expressing disbelief that he would orchestrate something so extreme. The possibility of a messy divorce was raised, and there was a suggestion to get rid of any video, with a cheeky request for a copy. While I dismissed Marta's last remark, her earlier words triggered a troubling thought. What if it wasn't a setup? The idea of a potential divorce weighed heavily on me, a dire possibility I was hesitant to consider. It felt like I might have shattered my marriage. But swiftly, I pushed the thought away, convinced it had to be a setup. That's what I stuck to, reassuring myself and trying to believe it. Then, a realization struck me, prompting a question about the last time a biker showed up at my door looking for a party. I wished it were true, and Marta acknowledged the possibility that I was right. The focus shifted to Lester's whereabouts, speculating that he might be sulking in some motel, furious that I had outplayed his prank. Just then, my phone buzzed, and I told Marta to hold on, thinking it might be Lester. However, disappointment washed over me as I realized it wasn't him, but an unfamiliar number. Upon answering the call, a voice I didn't recognize asked if I was Carrie Lynch. Inwardly groaning, I assumed it was a telemarketer and preemptively declined any offers. When the caller identified themselves as the police and mentioned injuries sustained by my husband, I dismissed it as another part of Lester's failed prank. Despite the assurance from the caller, claiming to be a detective named Fredericks, that they had checked my house and spoken to Lester, I doubted the legitimacy of the situation. Refusing to play along, I told the supposed detective that I would be home in an hour or whenever I pleased. If he wanted to talk, he could come by later. I ended the call abruptly. Marta expressed concern about the police calling me and suggested I should go see Lester. I shared my skepticism, unsure if the caller was genuinely a detective or just another one of Lester's ploys. Convinced that Lester was taking the joke too far, I expressed a desire not to dwell on it and proposed getting dessert, specifically craving chocolate. I arrived home post-lunch to find Lester absent, which wasn't unexpected. Just as ID started to remove my jacket and hang it up, the doorbell interrupted. Letting out a heavy sigh, I made my way to the door. A female police officer and a man who seemed to be a detective stood there, flashing badges and requesting entry. The shock hitmate was real, entirely unlike what I had anticipated. Doubts crept in. Perhaps they weren't really law enforcement. I asked to see their identification. They presented badges, ID cards, driver's licenses, and business cards. Everything checked out. Apologizing for my initial skepticism, I welcomed them in. That's when I remembered I hadn't tidied up from the previous night. The living room remained untouched since I'd gone to bed, displaying empty beer and liquor bottles, stains on the couch and rug, and, of course, the chair. The detective focused on the chair where Lester had been bound, noting the cut ropes, used duct tape, and bloodstains. I hadn't realized there was so much blood. The detective asked if this was where my husband was tied up, and I confirmed, adding that it was a bit more complicated. When asked about the complexity, I explained that my husband had orchestrated an ill-conceived April Fool's joke to make me think a biker gang would attack me. I turned the tables on him, making him believe I wanted something that made him uncomfortable. He got angry and stormed off when I freed him. When questioned about who initially tied him up, I mentioned a biker named Bandit and a couple of others. The detective shared that they had already spoken to Bandit, who was cooperating for a more lenient sentence. According to Bandit, I had invited them for a party, requested medications, and engaged in consensual activities. He alleged that I instructed him to tie up my husband to watch the event, claiming it was our shared interest. The detective needed to know if this was true or if they should pursue exploitation charges against Bandit as well. I attempted to explain that I had tried to stop it, but my efforts were in vain. I was trying to teach my husband a lesson in response to the mess he created, and I just went along with it. I hoped the detective could understand. Tears interrupted my words, and I paused before asking about Lester's condition and whether he was still at the ER. The detective explained that Lester was more angry than anything else. His wrists and ankles were bandaged and sore, as expected. Lester had been discharged after a couple of hours but came to the police station to press charges. The doctor anticipated a physical recovery, expressing relief that Lester wasn't seriously hurt. I acknowledged that it was his fault, and I didn't want to be made a fool of. The detective commented that I handled it effectively, but reminded me that they were not the judge of fault. Judges and juries would determine that soon. Suddenly, the detective stated that they were arresting me for assault and wrongful confinement of my husband. Additionally, they advised me to get checked for an STD, as one of the bikers I was with had a severe and persistent STD. The detective informed me of my right to an attorney. In a plea for understanding, I explained that it was meant to be a prank on me, and I retaliated. I protested against the arrest, arguing that it was Lester's fault, but the detective insisted that I should tell that to the judge. Subsequently, I found myself in jail, attempting to post bail. However, I discovered that my cards had been canceled. Despite the humiliation, I called my father and fabricated a story until he revealed that Lester had already contacted him. My father, who was close to Lester, berated me for minutes while I sobbed. Eventually, he agreed to bail me out and take me home. Upon arriving home, I sent a text to Lester pleading for a discussion to clarify things. His reply was cold. "Everything is clear to me. My response is coming soon." I hoped for a face-to-face or at least a call. Instead, I received divorce papers citing physical exploitation and emotional torment. I cried once more. I had allowed a foolish prank to ruin my marriage, an impractical joke, to say the least. The trial progressed swiftly. Bandit took the stand as the primary witness. His testimony detailed arriving at the wrong address, being invited by me and others to a party, tying up my husband at my behest, and engaging in consensual relations with me. In exchange for testifying against me, he received a minor sentence for the confinement charge. However, it was my husband's testimony that cut the deepest. He admitted to our history of pranks, but insisted he had vowed never to deceive me again, as he believed I trusted him. The events of that night shook him to the core, shocking him to an unfathomable degree. Under oath, Lester denied any prior contact with Bandit, any consent to a pretend or real foursome involving his wife, and declared that his love and respect for me vanished that night. Displaying the scars on his wrists and ankles, he mentioned they were a lasting reminder of why he could never trust me again. His admission that he might struggle to trust any woman caused tears even among some female jurors. My case crumbled when it was my turn to testify. Tearfully narrating my version, I sensed the jury's disapproval, especially from the female members I had hoped to sway. Guilt weighed on me, evident to all, and unsurprisingly, the verdict was guilty. I received a 2-year sentence, a leniency that could have been harsher. Back in county jail, I awaited transfer to prison when space became available. The final divorce papers arrived during my incarceration, but I barely acknowledged the settlement. One day, Lester visited, and I was puzzled by his presence. He sarcastically remarked that prison suits me. I acknowledged that I deserved the sarcasm and expressed regret for what I did to him, even if he didn't orchestrate it. Lester responded, stating it was too little too late, and that he still believed I had set him up. He presented a hypothetical scenario, suggesting a twisted motive on his part to orchestrate a divorce with the best terms a slicker than 50-50th split. He detailed a cunning plan involving squirreling away cash, bribing bikers, deceiving cops, and taking a minor sentence. He mentioned the need for ties to a gang, hinting at someone at work, whose brother needed his approval for a promotion. Lester expressed his shock when I took the situation to a level he hadn't anticipated. He claimed that seeing me enjoy it crushed him. Despite feeling torn between wanting to end both of us, he opted to put me behind bars, acknowledging his correctness. Lester stated that we were both fools in the mess, but I was the one behind bars. He questioned who the bigger fool was.
Hello, I'm a healthy young adult living in New York. Currently, I'm a freshman in college, but I've taken a semester off. During this break, I worked part-time at a local bar. I was diligently working there when I unexpectedly ran into my elementary school teacher, leading to an unimaginable turn of events. I'm studying culinary arts with the goal of working for a major corporation in the future. I dream of developing my own menu and obtaining a trademark for it. To brag a little, I'm 178 centimeters tall and lean. Until high school, I used to eat whatever my mom cooked, which led me to nearly reach 90 kilograms. However, I lost weight after going to college, which defined my jawline and improved my skin's elasticity. Some of my peers were so surprised by my transformation that they asked me for diet tips. Initially, it was tough to resist my favorite foods, but by reducing carbohydrates like snacks and flour, I successfully lost weight. I'm currently working at a nearby bar. My parents, who run a small business, insisted I take a break from working, especially in a challenging environment like serving at a bar. But I knew my father's business wasn't doing well. Their revenue has decreased, forcing them to lay off long-time employees and work by themselves. They only take one day off a week, which seems incredibly hard on them. My mom even knits scarves in her spare time at the business place and sells them. They're much better quality than what you find in cheap stores. She orders acrylic yarn in bulk and knits them, even while catching up with acquaintances over the phone. They love her scarves, starting with gifts before moving on to selling them. Sometimes, she even sells them on local mom cafes online. I try to help by cooking various dishes at home, which they greatly appreciate. I learned cooking by watching numerous YouTube cooking channels. Knowing how hard my parents worked to support my education, I couldn't ignore their struggles. I live in a neighborhood with a high population density, thanks to newly constructed apartment complexes. The bar where I work recently opened in one of these apartment complexes. It's popular because of its clean facilities, convenient restrooms, affordable and tasty snacks, and it's almost always full. The bar opens at 5 p.m. and a bit earlier on weekends. Although I'm supposed to serve, I sometimes help in the kitchen when it's busy. I'm proud to have saved enough money for next semester's tuition from my earnings. But you know, there's a charm to it. I've found the joy of saving money so rewarding that I started depositing into a savings account rather than spending it. I'm hooked on checking my savings grow through the bank's app every day. The brewpub I work at is part of a chain, so while we have a lot of ready-to-eat bar snacks, we also prepare many dishes ourselves. Every day of serving, you see all kinds of people. Since our place is in a neighborhood area, it tends to attract more middle-aged men and women. Not many young folks come in. After working at the brewpub for a few months, I've seen all sorts of customers. There are those who come in late in the evening, a man and a woman, not looking like a couple, but talking about their kids with a certain spark in their eyes. It seems there's quite a few affairs happening. Sometimes, customers from different tables end up joining each other. I once saw a group of attractive middle-aged women chatting and drinking, and the gentleman from the opposite table ended up joining them. The dim lights and alcohol seem to spark curiosity in people. Although I don't quite understand it, working at the brew pub at a young age has allowed me to witness a lot. Of course, there are those who, feeling good from the drinks, decide to continue the party at a karaoke bar. Working here has made me detest alcohol. Oh, I wish people knew their limits. Sometimes, people overdo it and end up vomiting. And I'm the one cleaning up the mess. Every time it happens, I think about quitting. But then I remember my parents and can't bring myself to do it. Thankfully, I have the stamina and perseverance to keep going. Embarrassingly enough, there are women who come in just to see me. It seems our brewpub got mentioned on a mom's community website. Brewpubs often hire young and tall part-timers. Someone posted about a good-looking staff member at our place. And since then, we've had a lot of middle-aged women visiting. They come out in the evening and stay until late, which has me worried about their family life. They drink heavily until closing time. Some customers even leave me tips for my hard work. The older gentlemen often ask me my age, if I'm in school, and commend me for working hard. Those days, even the boss is in a good mood. I arrive at the pub an hour before opening to clean and check the ingredients. When regulars come in, the boss sometimes makes them special snacks, which is why our place is doing quite well. There's hardly any time to sit down. My feet are sweating from all the serving, and I help with the dishes and tidying up after closing. I get home after midnight, take a shower, use a massager on my swollen legs, and then go to sleep. I wake up late in the morning, prepare some food, and do some house chores that my mom couldn't get to. Something special happened a few weekends ago. It was Sunday, and I saw a familiar face. It was my 5th grade homeroom teacher, sitting with a woman. They seemed to have a lot to talk about, ordering snacks twice. When the teacher's acquaintance went to the restroom, I approached their table. "Are you Emily? I was in your class 10 years ago," I greeted her. "Oh my, could it be Thomas?" She recognized me immediately. She was so happy to see me, asking me to sit and catch up. The Thomas who always excelled in writing and consistently won first place in art competitions. "How could I forget?" she exclaimed joyfully. I asked for her phone number, and upon saving it, I noticed a wedding photo. "When did you get married?" I inquired. "It's been 2 years," she replied. When I asked if she had any children, a friend she was with joked, "This one's living the single life, always saying how lonely it is, and spends time dining out with friends before heading home alone." I didn't know what to say and just looked at Emily, who then shared, "Well, my husband has been on an overseas assignment for a year now, with 3 more to go. We had a blissful first year of marriage before he had to leave. I told him to go and that I'd be fine continuing my teaching career here, but we make it a point to meet up in the country. He's enduring my school breaks." Emily had started her teaching career at the school right after graduating from college, which places her in her mid-30s now. She was very innocent back then, but left a lasting impression due to her warm interactions with every student. I had missed her, but felt too shy to reach out. It was even more delightful to learn she lives across from my apartment building. After reuniting, she visited our shop a few times with other acquaintances. Then one day, she suggested we meet for a meal. I was free on Mondays since my pub is closed, so we agreed to meet then. I went to her school around 4:30 p.m., the end of the school day, and borrowed my dad's car for the occasion. She mentioned a favorite barbecue place they often visited for staff dinners. We ended up dining there and lost track of time chatting away. She mentioned how she enjoys the bustling life at school, but feels incredibly lonely at home since there's no one to talk to. She invited me to her place for a casual drink, and I was curious to see how she was living. We stopped by a supermarket to pick up some drinks, snacks, and even toilet paper before heading to her apartment. Her place was charmingly decorated, reminiscent of a newlywed's home. We spent the evening catching up on friends and family, completely losing track of time. Then, with a serious look, she said, "Thomas, I've been feeling so lonely lately that I'm having trouble sleeping. Can you stay until I fall asleep?" I was too shocked to respond. After a moment, she went to change into a comfortable dress, still treating me with the same ease, as if I were still a child. I realized the teacher's intention and felt a deep connection with them. After returning from a 3-month trip to my husband's country, I felt incredibly lonely. So meeting up with a former student, who's now an adult, felt wonderful. We agreed to see each other more often. I've been spending quality time with my teacher frequently. The teacher would warn me about potentially risky days when we might be recognized by parents. And on such days, we'd either visit local eateries or travel to a nearby city for some shopping. We've even hit the nightclubs together, dancing the night away. Normally, the teacher would have coffee after work or head home early after dinner, but our dates have reduced the number of meals shared, with colleagues sparking their curiosity about what's been happening. Some joke about whether a new romance has blossomed, and the teacher, ever so innocent, can't even respond, just laughs it off, saying, "Sure, meet whoever you want when your spouse isn't around." My frequent meetings with the teacher have made our relationship much more comfortable than when we first met. Despite the decade of age difference between us, we get along incredibly well, which isn't something you find every day. Even on the eve of visiting my master, we were together.
Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Mike and Lisa had been eagerly awaiting this trip, a much-needed break from the hustle and bustle of daily life. The idea of spending a weekend in the mountains, surrounded only by the sounds of nature, felt like a dream. They had carefully planned every detail, from choosing a rustic cabin with large windows offering spectacular views of the hills, to a menu featuring fine wines and dishes prepared by Lisa, who loved to cook. Tom and Emma were more than friends, they were like family. The two couples had built years of memories together, from spontaneous trips to home dinners with long conversations about life. This trip had a special purpose, to celebrate a friendship that had withstood time and life's changes. When they arrived at the cabin, carrying suitcases full of cozy blankets and board games, they laughed like children upon realizing the place was even more beautiful than in the photos. The fresh mountain breeze was an invitation to relax and forget the outside world. On the first night, the energy was pure celebration. After a delicious meal, they gathered in the living room around a fireplace, where the wood crackled, spreading comforting warmth. Stories of past adventures were told between sips of wine, as laughter filled the room. It was the kind of moment that made Mike believe nothing could shake their connection. The next morning, the group explored the area around the cabin, walking along trails that wound through the trees and ended with a stunning view of a crystal-clear lake. Emma was the most excited, always suggesting funny poses for the photos they took together. Tom, more reserved, limited himself to smiling and keeping pace, while Lisa and Mike lagged behind, enjoying the tranquility of the place. Everything seemed perfect. The light and carefree atmosphere made Mike feel that this would be one of the best weekends of their lives.
When the second night came, the environment was even more relaxed. The fireplace was lit again, and the couple sat around it with their wine glasses. The conversation started with trivial matters but soon became more personal, reflecting the comfort and trust among them. Emma, always the most outgoing of the group, told a funny story about a trip she took with Tom years ago, eliciting hearty laughs from everyone. Lisa, who loved Emma's sense of humor, also opened up, sharing hilarious moments she and Mike had experienced together. It was the kind of night that seemed impossible to spoil. The perfect combination of laughter, stories, and the soothing sound of the wind outside created an ideal setting. Mike, sitting on the sofa with Lisa by his side, looked around and felt grateful for that moment. To him, the trip was fulfilling exactly what it promised, strengthening the bonds with their friends and providing a welcome break from routine. Little did he know that soon, a single sentence would completely change the dynamics of that night and shake the foundations of what he believed to be a solid relationship and an unshakable friendship. Emma leaned forward slightly, resting her elbow on the arm of the sofa, and with a mischievous smile lighting up her face, she uttered the sentence that, in an instant, completely changed the room's atmosphere: "What if we swap partners for a night?" The room, which moments before was filled with laughter and warmth, seemed to freeze in time. Mike felt a chill run down his spine, as if the air had suddenly become heavy. He laughed, trying to disguise the awkwardness. "Oh, sure, Emma, very funny," he replied in a tone that sought to normalize the situation. However, Mike's forced laughter met only the awkward silence of Tom, who avoided looking at anyone. Emma's smile, on the other hand, remained, as if she expected the idea to be taken seriously. And then the unexpected happened. Lisa, next to Mike, let out a light laugh and said with an enthusiasm he didn't recognize, "Wow, what a fun idea. Let's do it." Mike's heart sank. Those words, spoken by his wife with a surreal naturalness, hit him like an avalanche. He looked at her, hoping to find a playful expression, a look that would confirm it was just a harmless tease. But what he saw completely disarmed him. Lisa's eyes were shining with curiosity, as if the suggestion had ignited something inside her. Tom, who had been quiet until then, finally shifted on the sofa. He seemed uncomfortable, moving as if he wanted to disappear into the cushion. "I don't know if that's a good idea, Emma," he mumbled, his low voice almost lost in the crackling of the fireplace. But Emma didn't back down. She swirled her wine glass in her hand and insisted, with a playful tone that disguised the seriousness of her words, "Oh, it's just one night, no strings attached. Don't you think it would be interesting to try something new?" Mike averted his gaze, trying to find something, anything, to anchor his thoughts. The glow of the flames in the fireplace seemed to become more intense, or perhaps it was his mind trying to process the absurdity of the situation. He knew he needed to react but felt as if he were trapped in a slow-motion nightmare. Each passing second seemed to amplify the discomfort hanging in the room. Finally, he took a deep breath and, with a forced smile, tried to steer the conversation in another direction. "Well, I think we've had enough wine for tonight, huh? Maybe it's time to rest." His attempt to end the subject was a failure. Lisa, apparently excited about the idea, turned to him, placing her hand on his arm. "Mike, didn't you say you wanted to try something different in our relationship? Maybe it would be fun, something out of the routine." Those words hit him like a punch to the stomach. Since when was Lisa dissatisfied with their routine? He had never imagined that his wife, the woman he believed he knew deeply, could even consider something like that. The room seemed smaller now, and every face there seemed to carry secrets he didn't know. Mike stood up abruptly, mumbling something about needing a moment, and headed toward the bedroom. As he walked down the hallway, he could hear fragments of the conversation continuing in the living room. Emma, still insistent, was saying something about how modern couples were exploring new boundaries, while Tom grumbled in disagreement. And Lisa, he couldn't hear Lisa, but that only made everything more unsettling. Was she defending it? Was she silent? He didn't know which was worse. When he reached the bedroom, he closed the door behind him and leaned against it, trying to organize his thoughts. The cabin, once a haven of tranquility, now felt suffocating. He looked at the bed neatly made with crisp white sheets, the suitcases still open in the corner, a cruel reminder that the trip had just begun. His head was spinning, and he wondered how a night that promised to be light and full of laughter had turned into something so disconcerting. Mike sat on the edge of the bed and put his hands over his face, trying to breathe deeply. He needed answers, he needed to understand what was happening with Lisa, with Emma, with everyone there. But above all, he needed to understand what it meant for him, for the marriage he believed was solid as a rock. Deep down, something told him that the trip, which was supposed to celebrate friendship and love, had crossed a point of no return. A few minutes later, Lisa entered the bedroom. The door was opened slowly, as if she were trying not to disturb him. Her steps were hesitant, and the look she gave Mike carried a mix of uncertainty and concern. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, elbows resting on his knees, staring at the floor as if he expected to find answers in the grain of the wooden floor. When Lisa closed the door behind her, the sound of the latch clicking seemed to echo in the room, ending the brief moment of silence. "Mike," she began, her voice soft and cautious, but he didn't raise his eyes. There was an almost palpable tension between them, as if each word carried the weight of something that couldn't be taken back. "Please, don't misunderstand me. I just meant that maybe this could be something new, an experience. Something that would connect us in a different way." He finally lifted his eyes, and what she saw in them made her hesitate. There was no anger. There were no shouts or accusations. What Lisa saw was something much worse, deep, silent hurt. "Connect us," he repeated, his voice low but firm. "You think we need that to connect? Since when do you feel something is missing between us, Lisa? Because honestly, this is the first time I'm hearing you say anything like this." Lisa was silent for a moment, pressing her hands against her chest as if trying to find the right words. "It's not that something is missing," she said finally. I just meant that maybe stepping out of our routine could be interesting. When Emma mentioned it, I thought, well, I don't know. I got carried away by the moment. I didn't mean to hurt you." He stood up abruptly, moving away from her. He began pacing the room, hands clasped behind his head, a gesture Lisa recognized as a sign he was trying to control his frustration. "You didn't mean to hurt me?" "Lisa, how can you say that? You saw how I reacted in that room. You saw what that did to me. How could you even consider something like that for a second?" She didn't know how to respond. As much as she tried to justify it, she knew she had crossed an important boundary. "It was just a silly idea, Mike. I didn't even think it through. I was having fun, we had a bit to drink. It wasn't supposed to be something serious." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "Lisa, you don't get it. It's not just about what you said. It's about what it means. I thought I knew you, that I knew where our boundaries were. Now I'm wondering if everything I thought was solid between us is slipping through my fingers." The silence that followed was as heavy as Mike's words. Lisa tried to approach him, but he took a step back, as if he needed space. She felt small, powerless, as if she were watching the love between them, something she always considered indestructible, begin to crumble. "I don't want to talk about this right now," he said, lowering his voice. "I need some time to think. To understand how we got here." Without waiting for a response, Mike left the room, closing the door behind him with a firmness that made it clear he didn't want to be followed. Lisa was left alone in the room, feeling the weight of the choices she had made that night. She sat on the bed and ran her hands through her hair, staring into space. For the first time, she wondered if she had underestimated the impact of her words. That trip, which was supposed to be a celebration, now seemed to have turned into a survival test for their relationship. And as much as Lisa wished she could turn back time, she knew it was too late to undo what had been said. The next morning, silence dominated the cabin like a heavy cloud that refused to dissipate. The aroma of fresh coffee filled the kitchen, but instead of being welcoming, it seemed a timid attempt to bring normalcy to an obviously tense environment. Mike was sitting at the table, a cup in his hands, looking out the window where the morning mist stretched between the trees. His eyes were fixed on the landscape, but his mind was far away, lost in the turmoil of thoughts that had kept him awake most of the night. Lisa entered the kitchen shortly after, her steps light as if she feared breaking the fragile balance of the moment. "Good morning," she said softly, but the greeting hung in the air without a response. Mike only slightly tilted his head, without taking his eyes off the window. Lisa pulled out a chair and sat across from him but didn't have the courage to say anything more. The distance between them was greater than the table that separated them. Soon, Tom appeared, followed by Emma who, unlike the others, seemed to have slept well and acted as if nothing had happened. "Wow, that smells good," Emma said, grabbing a cup and pouring herself some coffee. She was cheerful, but her energy seemed out of place, almost inappropriate for the heavy mood in the room. Tom, on the other hand, was visibly uncomfortable. He avoided eye contact with Mike and Lisa, staying close to Emma as if hoping she wouldn't cross any more lines. After a few minutes of superficial conversation, which felt more forced than natural, Mike finally broke the silence surrounding him. He placed his cup on the table with a controlled but firm movement and looked directly at Tom. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice calm but laden with seriousness. Tom nodded, putting his cup down on the counter without finishing his coffee. The two stepped out onto the porch, where the fresh mountain air offered a welcome respite from the suffocating tension inside the cabin. For a few moments, they remained silent, watching the trees sway in the wind, until Mike finally began, "Tom, what happened last night was unacceptable." He took a deep breath before continuing. "I'm not just talking about what Emma suggested. I'm talking about how it shook everything this trip was supposed to represent. And honestly, I expected more from you." Tom seemed unsettled, his hands shoved into his pockets as he stared at the ground. "Mike, I didn't know Emma was going to say that. It was completely out of line. I was as surprised as you." "Then why didn't you say anything?" Mike retorted, his voice rising slightly but still controlled. "You stayed silent while she crossed a boundary. You could have stopped it, but you did nothing." Tom raised his eyes, finally meeting Mike's gaze. "I was trying to process what was happening. It was awkward, and I didn't know how to react. But believe me, I don't support what she said. Not at all." The sincerity in Tom's voice seemed to calm some of Mike's anger but didn't erase the hurt he felt. "Look, Tom, I understand that sometimes people say things without thinking. But what bothers me isn't just what was said. It's the impact of it. Lisa and I are in a complicated place right now, and I don't know if we'll be able to go back to how we were before." Tom sighed, running his hand over his face. "Mike, I'm sorry about that. Truly. I'll talk to Emma. She needs to understand the damage she's caused. And I want you to know that if I could go back in time, I'd have handled it differently." They stood in silence for a few more minutes, the sounds of nature filling the space between them. There was nothing more to be said at that moment. Mike knew Tom's words were sincere, but they couldn't undo what had happened. Their friendship, like his relationship with Lisa, was on unstable ground, and he wasn't sure how, or if, everything could be rebuilt. As they returned inside, the silence resumed. The feeling that something irreversible had happened hung in the air. Mike didn't know if that trip, or even the bonds that united the four of them, could survive that night. Back in the bedroom, Lisa was sitting on the edge of the bed, her eyes fixed on her hands clasped in her lap. The silence was dense, almost oppressive, and when Mike entered, closing the door carefully, the sound of the wood echoed like a final note in a melody no one wanted to hear. He leaned against the door for a moment, taking a deep breath before finally speaking. "I talked to Tom," he said, his voice calm but laden with emotional exhaustion. Lisa looked up, trying to decipher what he was feeling, but Mike seemed closed off, like an impenetrable fortress. He didn't know Emma was going to suggest that. But that doesn't change the fact that all of this is affecting us. Lisa stood up slowly, taking a few steps toward him. "Mike, I know I messed up," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I should have realized how wrong that was, how you'd feel. I don't know what got into me at the time. It was like I wanted to seem cool, fun. I didn't think about the consequences." He averted his gaze, running his hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "Cool," he repeated, his voice harsher now. "Lisa, this isn't about being cool. This is about respect. About boundaries. How did you not see that this would hurt us?" She took another step toward him, extending her hand as if she wanted to touch him but stopped halfway, hesitating. "I see that now, Mike. I saw it the moment you walked out of the room last night. And I hate myself for it. But please, give me a chance to fix this." Mike finally looked into her eyes, and what Lisa saw there disarmed her. It wasn't anger consuming him but deep sadness, a disappointment that seemed greater than she could bear. He crossed his arms as if trying to protect himself from opening up too much. "Fix this? How do you think we fix something like this, Lisa? It's not just about what happened last night. It's about what it represents. I thought we had a solid foundation. That we knew who we are to each other. Now I'm here, questioning everything." Her words hit Lisa like a blow. She knew Mike was hurt but hadn't imagined he was so lost regarding them. "Mike, I never wanted you to feel this way. You're everything to me. Everything. And maybe yesterday, I was trying to compensate for something I didn't even know I felt. I wanted something new, something to take us out of our routine. But I chose the worst possible way." He frowned, confusion mixed with pain in his eyes. "And you thought that was the right way? Swapping us, Lisa? Our intimacy, our trust, as if it were something disposable? That's what you think our marriage needed?" She finally took the step she'd been avoiding and held his hand, squeezing it tightly. "No. That's not it, Mike. I was stupid. I got carried away by a stupid idea. Please, listen to me. I love you. And I'm willing to do anything to show you that." He remained still, his expression unreadable as he looked at her. After a long moment, he released her hand, stepping back. "I just need time, Lisa. I need time to process all this. Because right now, I don't know what to think. And to be honest, I don't know if I can look at you the same way." His words were like a knife to Lisa's heart, but she knew she deserved to hear them. She felt her eyes burn but held back the tears, determined not to make the situation worse. "I'll wait, Mike. As long as you need. But please know that I haven't given up on us." He didn't respond, just grabbed his jacket and left the room, leaving Lisa alone again. This time, she couldn't hold back the tears. As the door closed, she collapsed onto the bed, sobs finally breaking the silence. She knew she had hurt Mike deeply, and now all she could do was hope he would find a reason to believe there was still something worth saving between them. Mike left the cabin and took a deep breath of the fresh mountain air, as if he needed to fill his lungs to ease the weight he felt in his chest. He walked aimlessly, following the trail they had explored the day before, but this time, the beauty around him seemed distant, almost irrelevant. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, memories, and questions. He wondered how something that seemed so solid between him and Lisa had become so fragile, so easily shaken. As he walked, flashes of past moments appeared in his mind. He remembered when he met Lisa, how they would laugh together for hours effortlessly, how they built a life based on trust and complicity. That was what hurt him the most, the feeling that something so precious could be jeopardized by an impulsive idea, something that didn't even make sense to him. But at the same time, he wondered if he had ignored signs, if he had failed to notice that something was missing for her. The trail ended in a clearing that led to a cliff, offering a wide view of the mountains. Mike stopped there, gazing at the horizon. The silence around him was almost deafening, broken only by the sound of the wind through the trees. He ran his hands over his face, trying to organize his thoughts. He loved Lisa, of that he was certain. But love didn't seem enough to fix what had been broken. Meanwhile, back at the cabin, Lisa was sitting at the kitchen table, holding a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. Emma, noticing the tense atmosphere, tried to start a conversation. "Lisa, you know last night was just a silly idea, right? I didn't mean to cause all this drama." Lisa looked up, staring at Emma with an expression that mixed exhaustion and frustration. "Emma, you don't understand. It wasn't just the idea. It was what it revealed about me, about what's happening between me and Mike. Don't you see that it was more than just a joke?" Emma hesitated, not knowing what to say. For the first time, she seemed to realize that her words from the previous night had gone far beyond what she imagined. "I'm sorry, Lisa. Really. Maybe I went too far." "It's not about you," Lisa replied, shaking her head. "It's about us. I saw Mike's look last night, and he was so hurt. And I know I was the one who caused it." On the porch, Tom watched from a distance. He knew he needed to talk to Emma but didn't know where to start. The tension among everyone was palpable, and he felt that the trip, planned to be a moment of celebration, had turned into a minefield of unresolved feelings. A few hours later, Mike returned to the cabin. He entered quietly, finding Lisa in the kitchen. She stood up as soon as she saw him but said nothing, waiting for him to break the silence. He put his hands in his pockets and looked at her, his face still laden with doubts but also with something that seemed to be a decision. "Lisa," he began, his voice firm but without hostility. "I've thought a lot. About us. About what all this means. And I realized something. I don't want to give up on you. I don't want to give up on us. But that doesn't mean it will be easy to forget what happened." Lisa's eyes filled with tears. She took a step forward but hesitated. "Mike, I don't expect you to forget. I just want you to know that I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. I know I was wrong. I know I hurt you." He nodded slowly, as if still processing his own words. "Fixing this will take time, Lisa. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. But if you're willing to try, so am I." Lisa took another step, this time carefully holding his hand, as if fearing he would pull away. "I am, Mike. More than anything. Because at the end of the day, you're everything to me. And I never want you to doubt that again." He squeezed her hand lightly, a spark of hope beginning to light up his eyes. It was a start, small but real. And as the two remained there, trying to find a new balance, the cabin felt less suffocating, and the sound of the wind outside carried a silent promise that with effort and love, some things could be rebuilt. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.